It started like any other normal night at the Edgewood pub on the outskirts of town, a dimly lit place filled with the smell of stale beer and cleaning chemicals, the muttering of conversation mixed with the sound of glass groaning in the background. Hardly noticeable unless you really hear Kyle's, because this is a common stopping point, his daily life. It was an escape from the noise, but tonight there was something different about the air. As soon as he walked in, his senses were suddenly overwhelmed by the faint breath of something sharp and sweet, but fleeting, disappearing as quickly as it had entered. He wasn't sure if it was the unique smell of the bar or something deeper, but it smells good. An inexplicable shiver ran down his spine. That was the first time I heard her, laugh, soft and musical, wafted like an echo in the dimly lit room. It caught his attention in a way he couldn't explain. It's so funny it's out of this world. It's like they're part of the same place. He turned towards the sound. And there she was. Mia. She looked familiar, but not in the way he could. There was something alluring about her presence, attracting him. Regardless of the noise around him, Mia smiled at him. And that smile seemed to be a secret that Kyle wasn't sure he was ready to learn. They would talk for hours, as if they had known each other for years. Time passed without anyone noticing, but each second that passes, something began to bite at the edges of Kyle's mind, as if he had lived this moment before, but in another life, another version of myself. When the conversation finally ended and Mia apologized, Kyle felt a strong desire to see her again. He wrote her a note, slipped it under her windshield wiper, and waited. Weeks passed with no response. The silence spoiled him. It was rotting inside like a bitter taste that he couldn't wash away. As he almost forgot her, he saw Mia again, sitting at the same bar, same corner. But this time the air felt heavier, with an energy that Kyle couldn't feel. When she smiles at him, something flashed in her eyes. A strange recognition, but not from this life. It hit him like a wave, and the room immediately felt cold. This was the beginning of something he didn't understand, something that would haunt him forever. Mia invites him to a house on the edge of town, a house that seems like it's always been there. Stand against the winds of the changing times, the kind of house that keeps secrets within its walls. A place that seemed to be alive, even though no one was looking. And Kyle wasn't sure why he agreed. Maybe it's the allure of mystery. Maybe it was his own curiosity. He shouldn't have gone inside, but when he walked through the door, it hit him immediately, the cold. It's not the usual coolness of an old house, but it's something deeper than that. The air seemed alive. Wrapped around him like an invisible hand, the smell of damp wood, dust, something else, something acidic, was lingering in the air. And every breath felt exhausting. The house doesn't feel like it's been abandoned, but it doesn't feel alive either. I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting. His footsteps echoed as he crossed the creaking wooden floor. His senses were overwhelming. The sound of the floorboards under his feet rang out, unaffected in the oppressive silence. But it's not just the sound. The shadow in the corner of the room that had stretched unnaturally began to move. At first, Kyle thought it was a trick of the light. But then the walls groaned. It was a sound that hit his skin. The house suddenly became lively, looking at him. Then it burst out from under the dining table. At first it was hard to explain. It was just a blur of movement, too fast to be seen in his peripheral vision. Kyle's heart stopped as he walked into the dim light. There was a creature in the shadows. There was nothing he could know. his arms stretched out like the branches of a dead tree, twisting dead trees into unnaturally long and spiky shapes. His eyes, those eyes, shined dimly like dying coals in a fire, flickering between red and yellow, burning with such intensity that it made Kyle's stomach sink. There was more than just watching him. He is studying him. His gaze was cold and intense. Then, as if to prove that it was not just his imagination, the creature said. His voice was like gravel hitting metal. Kyle's reflection made his body tense with fear. "Mia," he said, his voice almost too soft, but there was an unnatural weight with him. Kyle was so cold, he searched Mia's face for any sign of comfort, or some explanation, but she wasn't afraid. She looked calm, almost detached. It was as if she had seen him 1,000 times before. "This is Twig," she said softly, her voice definitely free of the fear that Kyle radiated. "He is always here. He is my friend." Kyle didn't know how to answer. Mia's warm voice should be comforting, but it only raised the hairs on the back of his neck. This is not normal. This is not a friend. Twig is something much darker, and Mia knows this. When the night passes, Mia reveals more about her life, her father, the man who once locked her in the same house. Call her crazy about Twig protecting her from him. He never believed her. She was just a little girl when Twig first appeared. A girl running away from something darker than a nightmare. But Mia didn't run anymore. Then comes the steps. The air in the house became thicker and more suffocating. The walls seemed to close in, and Kyle heard heavy footsteps and the unmistakable sound of boots hitting old wood. He doesn't know who it is, but Mia's face turned white. His lips parted to speak, but she didn't say anything. "He's here," she whispered. Kyle felt his temperature drop even more. He sensed that something frightening was approaching. That's when the door opened. Mia's father entered the room. The man was angry, and his voice resounded throughout the house like thunder, shaking the walls with every word. "You're crazy," he said. He shouted to Twig, his face contorted with rage and his eyes wide with disbelief. But Twig didn't back down. Moved forward, taking a defensive stance. In front of Mia, his limbs were spread out and dirty, ready to fight. The shadows in the room seemed to respond to the creature's movements, twisting and swirling like living things along the edge of the wall. And what happened next was a blur of motion. Mia's father rushed towards her, but Twig is faster. The creatures attacked with speeds that Kyle could not understand. The shadows around him distorted, and the air was filled with a strange electric hum that Kyle had to grab Mia and pull her back, but she wouldn't go anywhere. "Let me go," she said sternly. "I'm not running anymore." She had the chance to leave, but Mia didn't run from the truth. She stood still, and Twig moved. His dazzling eyes stared at her with such intensity that the whole room felt like it was about to explode. Then her father quickly passed away. He disappeared into thin air, leaving Mia standing in the middle of the room, panting. The house seemed to suffocate, lifting its weight into the air. Those shadows stopped passing by. For the first time since Kyle arrived, the house still exists. Mia is free. It's not a house, though. Several weeks later, Kyle is with Mia. They are trying to start a new life, but sometimes when the wind blows through the trees outside, Kyle then heard the faintest whisper coming from the wall. He couldn't explain anything, but it seemed like he was trying to tell the house something, remind him of his secret. He realized that some things were meant to be hidden in the shadows. A breathing house, that was the home I remembered before Kyle stepped through her door. She also claims to have Mia. Some mysteries might not be solved yet, Kyle thought.